Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Fentanyl, Understanding and Responding to the Fentanyl Crisis. I'm Melinda Samberson, VP Programs and Resources for Texas PTA, and I'm honored to serve as the moderator for this crucial discussion. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the growing fentanyl crisis and its devastating impact on individuals, families, and communities here in Texas and across the United States. Fentanyl, a synthetic opioid up to 50 times stronger than heroin, has contributed to adolescent overdose deaths, nearly tripling from 2019 to 2021. Victims, including young tweens, are fatally overdosing on one pill, having no idea the fentanyl was laced in what they took. And sadly, no community has been free from the effects of this crisis. Following a video presentation, we will host a panel of experts to discuss the fentanyl crisis and how it's impacting our children and communities. Today's webinar aims to provide participants with an understanding of fentanyl, its properties, how it affects the body, and its potential dangers, information on the current state of the fentanyl crisis, its prevalence, trends, and impact on communities, strategies for harm reduction, exploring ways to prevent fentanyl use and overdose, and how to respond effectively in case of emergency. Resources and support, providing participants with access to information and assistance programs. Let's watch this informative video prepared by Livy together.
Fentanyl overdose is the leading cause of death for people between the ages of 18 and 45. Our children between the ages of 10 and 18 are on the cusp of being included in this frightening statistic if changes do not occur, as the number of fentanyl overdoses in this young age bracket have increased 109% between 2019 and 2021 and is still on the rise. My name is Cynthia Persley, founder and president of Livy. Livy is a nonprofit with the mission to educate on the dangers of fentanyl, how to recognize the signs of an overdose, how to administer Naloxone, and provide Naloxone dispensers and safety packs. Thank you for taking the time today to watch our presentation. Our hope is you walk away with some new knowledge and understanding of this national epidemic that is taking our loved ones at such a high skyrocketing rate. Let us all make it our goal to stay alive together. Thank you.
Tucker was born with an adventurous spirit and on the surface looked like he was living his best life. My son was training for a triathlon, struggling with sleep and anxiety. He purchased one illicit pill on social media and that pill took his life. Fentanyl is taking a whole generation of brilliant minds. If you don't receive medication from a pharmacy, count that it has fentanyl. One pill does kill.
To learn more, visit onepillkillstx.com.
Fentanyl is not what comes to most people's minds as the number one cause of death among people ages 18 to 45. But the fact remains true. Welcome to our presentation, Understanding the Fentanyl Crisis. Now, this is not an easy subject matter for most to speak about. Furthermore, it is an extremely nuanced and complicated issue that can get emotional very quickly. We are here to break things down, step by step, in order to deliver the most pertinent and life-saving information. So, let's start from the beginning. What is fentanyl? There are many variations or analogs of fentanyl. However, for simplicity, we use the term fentanyl as to encompass all types or variations of fentanyl. Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid, meaning that it is similar to naturally occurring opiates such as morphine and codeine in shape and effect. Fentanyl differs from natural opiates in that it does not occur naturally and is synthesized or created in a laboratory. This ultimately means that fentanyl is cheaper and easier to produce than natural forms of opiates. Fentanyl has been used regularly in hospitals around the world for the past 60 or so years as a sedative and treatment for extreme pain. While acting in a very similar way to other opioids, what sets fentanyl apart is its potency. Fentanyl is estimated to be around 100 times as potent as morphine, and as a consequence, does not require a large dose to have an effect or kill. Shown in the image on the slide, a lethal dose of fentanyl can be as small as a few grains of salt on the tip of a pencil. Because it is so powerful, when used outside of the proper medical setting, fentanyl has almost no margin for error, and the slightest miscalculation can and will take a life. Coupled with the fact that many people who come into contact with fentanyl do so unknowingly and with a lack of general knowledge or preparedness, the spread of fentanyl has been an unmitigated disaster in the United States. Currently, fentanyl is used as a cutting agent in many scenarios, meaning that it is mixed in with large amounts of another drug or substance and marketed as something other than fentanyl. Whether it is fake prescription pills or another street drug not related to opioids at all, anything not dispensed at a legitimate pharmacy risks containing a trace or large amounts of fentanyl. There are many reasons why this is done by illicit dealers, but primarily it is done as a profit-boosting measure. Because fentanyl is so cheap to produce and can be created almost anywhere, it has infiltrated every level of our society, and mostly in disguise. Fentanyl has been around for a while now, but it is only within the last decade or so that we've seen as many as 220 deaths per day in the US. Since the year 2000, there has been a 200% increase in the rate of overdose or poisoning deaths involving opioids. Most experts break what is known as the opioid crisis into 3 separate waves or time frames. For the sake of brevity and simplicity, we will focus on the third wave, the one that we are currently in. The third wave is characterized by the proliferation of fentanyl on the black market. Before 2014, fentanyl was not a common drug found on the street, but in 2014, it started to become a regular feature of illicit opioids. The trend has continued to this day, unfortunately, where now the DEA estimates that between 6 or more of any 10 counterfeit pills may contain fentanyl. It is between 2014 and the current year that fentanyl fatalities rose from near zero to over 70,000 deaths in 2021. Now, it is very easy to see this as a problem only for adults who use opioids. However, the fact remains that kids and teenagers across Texas are potentially at risk of encountering fentanyl in one form or another. In 2021, fentanyl was involved in 84% of all teenage overdose deaths. The rate of fentanyl-related deaths in teens has nearly tripled since 2019, with average monthly overdose deaths increasing by 182%. As the adolescent brain is still forming well into adulthood, opioids such as fentanyl can have a direct effect on their social and physical development. Heavy usage of opioids in teens results in a rewiring of the brain's neurotransmitters and can have long-lasting effects on performance, intelligence, and emotional state. Another factor that increases the risk of fentanyl poisoning in teens are the drugs that they tend to consume. It may not shock some to hear that marijuana or cannabis is the most widely reported used substance for kids 12 and up. But what is even more concerning is that prescription pills are the second highest reported substance within the same age group. However, it is impossible to tell the difference between a counterfeit prescription pill and a legitimate one without properly testing it thoroughly. Part of the risk that teens and children face is the sharing of medications or pills. It is important that teenagers know one pill will kill, and that the only pills that are truly safe are the ones that have been prescribed to them by a doctor and dispensed at a pharmacy. The tendency for kids to pass around Xanax, Adderall, and other prescription medications puts them at a greater risk of encountering fentanyl. The COVID-19 pandemic and the resulting lockdowns have been a big factor in the increase of opioid-related deaths in children and teens. In the short term, the rates of teenage overdose rose by nearly 70%. Furthermore, the rate of overdose deaths in ages 14 to 18 rose by 20% between 2020 and 2021 alone. 2020 also saw the rate of overdose mortality in teens increase at a higher rate than that relative to the general population. Between January 2021 and December 22, there were recorded 3,955 deaths between the ages of 14 and 24, directly attributed to illicit fentanyl.
Danica was very independent. She was fearless. She was fun. She was funny. She thought she was taking a prescribed pill, and in reality, it was a fake pill laced with fentanyl. My life has been devastated by the loss of my daughter. Don't take the risk. Think like it can happen to you.
To learn more, visit onepillkillstx.com.
Fentanyl is ravaging our communities and destroying lives. What can we do to ensure that kids are safe? Keep in mind that the societal stigma that we have placed on substances and substance users continues to play a role in how we deal with the problem. For example, the shame and stigma of being known as a user or addict drives many people who are suffering to stay silent rather than to seek assistance. The first step is making sure children understand that it is safe to talk about these things without being labeled or judged. Especially for teens and young adults, it is imperative that parents open a line of communication that is free of judgment or anger to speak to their kids. This is something much easier said than done, and every family and relationship is different. But young adults need to feel safe to speak their minds without being worried about what might happen. We do not want to have the talk with our kids because of the eye rolling, the size, annoyance, defensiveness. The danger of fentanyl is too great to risk not trying. For any household that has children, steps should be taken to secure all prescription medications. Locking the medicine cabinet and dispensing medications to your children directly are the best way to ensure that they are not misusing any prescription medications. Any unused medications should be disposed of through the proper means. Do not dispose of any medications through flushing them. Instead, look for your nearest medication disposal kiosk. Purchasing overdose reversal medications, such as Naloxone, are a potentially life-saving measure and should be kept available within the household. Naloxone, often known by its brand name, Narcan, is now approved for over-the-counter use, and it can greatly aid in reversing an overdose and buying time for first responders. Naloxone can come in multiple forms, most commonly as a nasal spray, but can also be in the form of an intramuscular injection or an auto-injector, similar to an EpiPen. At Livy, we tend to focus on the nasal spray, as it is the most widely available form and the one that most everyday people feel comfortable enough to use in a true emergency. Naloxone works by having a molecular structure similar enough to opioids like fentanyl or heroin to bind with the same receptors in the brain that those drugs themselves bind to. The difference being that naloxone is a rather inert substance and produces no noticeable effect. If naloxone is used on a person experiencing an opioid overdose, naloxone will enter the brain and remove the opioid molecules that are bound to the brain's receptors and fill their place. Once the active opioid molecules are removed from the receptors, they are no longer producing an effect and are not able to rebind to the receptors until either they are flushed out of the system naturally or the naloxone's effect has worn off. Depending on the size of the dose of naloxone, the method of ingestion, and the amount and type of opioids originally taken, the overdose reversing effect can last for different periods of time. Typically, injected naloxone acts faster and for longer. It is important that any time that naloxone is used outside of a medical setting, that the patient is brought immediately to a hospital to ensure that they do not end up falling back into their poisoned state when the naloxone wears off. There is very little risk, if any, in administering naloxone, even to someone who has not taken any drugs. It is a safe and clinically proven treatment for opioid overdose and poisonings. and you should not be afraid to use it if the situation calls for it.
911, what's your emergency?
It is important to understand what an overdose or poisoning looks like in order to understand why naloxone is such a powerful tool. An overdose or poisoning can be defined as when the amount of a substance that someone has consumed is greater than their body's tolerance or ability to effectively process the substance. How this looks symptomatically can be drastically different depending on the substance used and the person using them. The reason why opioids are considered to be so dangerous and deadly is the way in which they act on the brain. The same receptors in the brain that opioids and naloxone bind to is the same biological pathway that controls the respiratory system in humans. When someone has ingested more of an opioid than their body can handle, the respiratory system is not able to function properly, if at all, and causes the user to become heavily sedated with slow or shaky breathing, or ceasing to breathe altogether. The function of naloxone in this situation is to prevent more opioids from producing their effect, as well as an attempt to allow the body's natural breathing instincts to kick in. In other words, naloxone is able to put a temporary pause on the reaction happening inside the body. The main symptoms of an overdose or poisoning will be similar to that of suffocation: lack of or slowed breathing, heavy sedation, loss of color in the face, clammy to the touch, blue or purpling of the lips and extremities, as well as vomiting or gurgling noises. If someone is presenting these or similar symptoms, call 911 immediately and explain that you suspect an opioid poisoning. Now that we know what fentanyl is and how naloxone works, it is simply a matter of being prepared for the worst-case scenario, if or when it should happen. The slide featured here is a basic walkthrough of the steps to take if you suspect that someone is experiencing an overdose or poisoning. The first step is evaluating the situation and checking for signs of an overdose. If unconscious or unresponsive, try to stimulate the patient with a stern but careful sternum rub, using the edges of your knuckles. If there is no response from the patient, it is time to act. If you have naloxone in your possession, administer it to the patient immediately. If there are bystanders or other people in the area, assign someone to call 911 and report a suspected overdose or poisoning. Note that this person will likely need to remain on the line and relay more information to 911 dispatchers. If you are alone and there are no bystanders to call 911, administer naloxone first and then dial 911. If the first dose of naloxone is effective in restoring breathing or consciousness, remain with the patient until help has arrived. If the patient is revived and states that they do not need medical attention, do not listen to them and continue to request help from the authorities. If after 2 to 3 minutes of naloxone being administered, the patient has not begun to breathe or breathing continues to be unstable, administer a second dose of naloxone, using the patient's other nostril. If the patient begins breathing at any point after administering naloxone, roll them onto their side and into the recovery position, especially if they are still unconscious. This is to prevent the possibility of the patient choking on their own vomit, in the case that they do. If naloxone has been used and the patient is still not showing signs of breathing, begin to administer rescue breaths or CPR while you wait for 911 to arrive.
Fentanyl is a powerful synthetic opioid that is found in pressed pills as well as added to other street drugs. Fentanyl is 50 times stronger than heroin and 100 times stronger than morphine. 2 milligrams is a lethal amount of fentanyl, which is comparable to 2 or 3 grains of salt. Of all pills that were seized by the DEA in 2022, 99% of them tested positive for fentanyl.
99%. So if you're buying a pill off the streets, you should know that you're gambling with your life. You can't see it, you can't taste it, you can't smell it, and it is in everything.
If you're getting anything from a friend off the street, it's got fentanyl in it.
Fentanyl is the leading cause of death among 18 to 45-year-olds. You have a higher chance of dying from fentanyl than a car accident.
This is a drug that I've never seen in my career that will kill you graveyard dead the first time and you didn't even know what you were taking.
Where does fentanyl come from? It comes from China, where it's shipped to Mexico.
And the cartels are making the products and it's being smuggled over to the United States.
The drug demographic has completely changed. All drugs are being poisoned by fentanyl. Fentanyl is highly addictive and it's highly lethal.
So the faster they can get you addicted and it's a quicker low, you're gonna buy more in the process.
Fentanyl is often sold on social media, such as Snapchat and Instagram. Other apps, such as Signal and Telegram, are often used to help distribute fentanyl. The effects of fentanyl can include nausea, vomiting, drowsiness, confusion, changes in pupil size, and respiratory depression, which can lead to death.
Some people are dying is because it causes respiratory depression, and the amounts they're getting, it actually, when you're getting too much, it's respiratory arrest.
Fentanyl is often found in pressed pills. These pills are made to look like other pharmaceutical medications.
I mean, these people can put out 30,000 pills a day with a machine in their apartment, pressing pills. You know, they're just putting scoops of fentanyl powder into a big mixing bowl. So you don't know, one pill may be straight fentanyl powder, the other one may have no fentanyl powder, and that's the big danger. That's why we see kids taking one pill and they're dead.
And that's the scary part about it, is even if you're, trying to get a medication from your friend that you know and you trust, you don't know where they got it from, who gave it to them, and you really just don't know what you're taking.
This is a very unforgiving drug and you never get a second chance. That's the reality of life. Actually, that's the reality of death.
On behalf of all of the organizations featured in this slideshow or on the panel, we hope that imparting this information will help Texans keep themselves and families safe. We have covered a lot of information on the opioid crisis, but we want to leave you with an avenue of exploring this matter on your own and heavily urge you to do so. Fentanyl.tv is a website created by TXAF, Texas Against Fentanyl, that hosts a library of videos and information regarding fentanyl and how to keep the ones you love safe. Livy's mission is to help increase the public's access to Naloxone through our Livy Narcan dispenser, a small cardboard display case that contains 2 doses of Naloxone, with both Spanish and English instructions included. Lightweight and easily hung on a wall, the Narcan dispenser is our way of making sure that Naloxone is available whenever it is needed. We focus on restaurants, public venues, schools, and collegiate organizations. If you are interested in obtaining a Naloxone dispenser, please contact Livy on our website, www.livy.org. We hope that you will take the time to explore fentanyl.tv and livy.org with your families and loved ones. Let us all work together and do our small part in creating a brighter, more vibrant future for Texas.
The information provided that we just saw is so sobering. Now we will take some time for our distinguished panel of experts joining us today to share their insights and answer your questions. Cynthia Persley, founder and president of Livy, which has a mission of educating and preventing fentanyl overdose. Tyson Hodges, a retired DEA special agent with an impressive law enforcement career and co-founder, along with his wife, Deb Hodges, of Operation 360, an organization dedicated to fentanyl crisis prevention and supporting impacted families and bridging the gap between law enforcement and communities. Unfortunately, Callie Crow is not able to join us this morning, so we were going to be PTA flexible. Ryan Vaughn has graciously agreed to pinch hit for her in her place. He is a board member of Texas Against Fentanyl and father of 2 Plano High School students, including a 16-year-old daughter who passed away from fentanyl this past February. Jared Gilstrap is a 26-year veteran of the Dallas Fire Rescue Department and is now the overdose response team coordinator and outreach paramedic with Dallas Fire Rescue's Medical Outreach, Diversion, and Social Support Program. We encourage you, while you're listening, to actively participate in the discussion by submitting your questions through the webinar chat. So we're going to get started with our questions for our panelists. Jared, can you speak by telling us more about who is impacted by the fentanyl crisis in Texas? Is it more prevalent in a certain age range, region, or demographic? And where are kids getting access to fentanyl?
Truly, I think ages from anywhere from 12 to 55 are being affected by fentanyl. Just when you try to segregate an age group, you find that 65-year and older, they're actually rising in regards to overdoses due to fentanyl. The access that people are getting, it's coming from social media. They're using emojis to go on places like Snapchat to access those drugs that they're trying. And sometimes people are accessing the drugs thinking it's just maybe Xanax or something, but fentanyl is in 99% of illicit drugs. So that means that anything that doesn't come from a pharmacy, it's going to have fentanyl in it. So you have to teach your kids to be careful not to take anything that doesn't come from a pharmacy. And as the DEA and HIDA says, 1 pill can kill.
All right, thank you. Ryan, can you talk to us about when and how should parents start talking to their kids about fentanyl?
Absolutely. So I would recommend that parents start talking to their kids as early as possible, as soon as they can understand it. When you're talking to them about, not running out in traffic, right? It's important for them to understand not to take medicine from anybody but their parent. And I think when you have those conversations early on, it's important to start by listening. Try to understand, allow them to understand that you are there not to judge. You're there to help educate them. You're concerned. And then getting that information across in a way that doesn't seem like, you're trying to lecture them, right? Warn them about those fake prescription pills. It doesn't matter what they are. Maybe a name that you've heard of before that's advertised to you or someone offers you. And, it's very likely that could have fentanyl in it, and it could be enough there to kill you. So I think, again, it's very important at the very earliest age and to continue to reinforce that over the years. In every conversation you have about this, don't take any drugs that I, as your parent, don't get for you from the pharmacy. Don't trust your friends, right? This is how my daughter died. She trusted her friend to give her a Percocet, and that killed her. So that's, you can use a story like that when you have those conversations. Anything can contain fentanyl. So important to continue to have those conversations. Don't just make it a one-time thing. Continue to bring it up throughout their growing up and continue to reinforce that message.
Thank you. Our youth ambassador panelist, Anna Kate Manos, a high school student in Frisco, was pulled away by final exams today and unable to join us. But she has an important message we'd like to share about what parents can do to help protect their kids.
Hello, I am Anna Kate Manos. I'm 17 and I live in Frisco, Texas. I have had many people around me, including myself, affected by this epidemic, more than I can count on both hands. Their lives have been ruined and taken because of one bad decision. And this epidemic is killing our whole generation, my whole generation, from the ages of 10 to 20. People are dying, and we need to do something about it. I think it's up to the parents to create a safe space and a safe space for open dialogue and education about fentanyl and about the awareness and about how they can make a difference, that they can show their kids it's okay to talk about this. Like, we need to talk about this. That is, the education is what is going to help change this. And please, parents, make a safe space. Open the conversation up for your kids. We need this. Be a part of the change.
Jared, if I could come back to you, what forms can fentanyl take? Can it be a liquid? Is it just found in pills? Can it be mixed with marijuana?
Fentanyl typically comes in two main forms, that is powder and liquid. The powder form is made into pressed pills, and those pills are made to look like, as Ryan said earlier, Percocet or even Xanax. Again, I reiterate, powdered fentanyl is in 99% of illicit drugs. And then you also take the liquid, and the liquid form can be used to replace heroin. And so someone might take fentanyl and place it with trank, or excuse me, we'll place it with the xylazine, and it's called trank. Or they also take and mix heroin along with fentanyl, and they call it Great Death. So people are constantly changing the structure of fentanyl and adding it to other drugs to make different drugs, because they're trying to seek that high that they can't get from just fentanyl alone. And so you have to teach your kids to be careful. I know this panelist is going to reiterate this today, and I'll do it again. Do not take a pill from someone don't take any illicit pill unless it comes from a pharmacy. Then don't take it.
Jared, can I follow up with that? Can you speak to marijuana? Have you found fentanyl in marijuana?
Yes, we have. We actually have taken a couple of patients, that is, to the hospital, and the lady said that she did smoke marijuana and she doesn't do fentanyl, and she tested positive for fentanyl. And like most people, I would say, she didn't want that. She just wanted the marijuana. And so unfortunately, drug dealers are spraying the marijuana laced with fentanyl, and they're putting it in just about every illicit drug you can think of.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for clarifying that. Tyson, what can you tell students who are afraid of calling 911 for an overdose because they've been using an illegal substance themselves, or maybe they're apprehensive about seeking help for themselves or their friends? Does the Good Samaritan law apply here?
That's an excellent question. Thank you. Unfortunately, it's not really a civil question to answer. There are a lot of variables that really go into this. I think people really need to understand that the goal or the objective is not to arrest our way out of this. That's not the purpose. The purpose is to connect people with the services they need. I think the easiest way to explain what I'm talking about is just a very quick scenario. If you're at a party and someone at the party is overdosing, we want you to go assist that person. We want you to help. We want you to call 911, give them a Naloxone, and stay with them. In that particular case, you're not going to be in trouble. In fact, we want to encourage people to do that. Compare that with someone that is at the same party who brought the drugs to the party, that sold the drugs or gave the drugs out. Now that individual, that's a completely different scenario. And so we could arrest that person, at the scene. But again, the goal is not to arrest people that are trying to help. The goal is actually to connect people with the services that they need.
Right. Thank you. Cynthia, can you talk to us a little more about Naloxone, please? How often should I replace it? Is it expired? Is it usable? Who should keep it on hand, and where should they store it?
Thank you. Yes, Naloxone does have an expiration date, and it's on every box. It has the expiration, and the manufacturer does recommend disposing of the nasal spray of Naloxone prior to expiration. A little trick is to put a sticker on the box and write the expiration date on it, so you don't have to be looking at it, and you can see when, be reminded of that expiration date. So it is recommended to dispose of it prior to expiration, and it does last a few years, so you don't have to be replacing this monthly. But be aware of that expiration date. Do not store it, in any extreme temperatures. So don't freeze it, or you don't want it over 104-degree temperature. so that it just keep it at a room temp, so that it's not exposed to those different elements. And it's also recommended to perhaps have two naloxone. A lot of specialists recommend having one in that junk drawer at your house where everything is, and so that the kids know about it and everyone knows where it is, and also one in the medicine cabinet. So that's just another option, is to have two at all times if possible.
Okay, perfect. And I took some time to go online, and I'll try and keep this still. I went on the website that Livy had suggested, and I went to order one to see how easy it was to get. And you can get it very easily. And it took probably less than a month to get. And so just keep that in mind. We'll give you information as we follow up on how to get it if you would like to have it at your house. And so follow-up question for you, Cynthia. What happens if I administer Narcan or someone who, as it turns out, is not overdosing on fentanyl? Is Narcan effective for reversing overdoses on other drugs?
No, the naloxone has one purpose for the opioid overdose. But if someone is not overdosing, and let's say they've had too much alcohol, or they're actually having a medical condition, naloxone is not going to hurt that person at all, because it only has one purpose: to attach to those receptors. So there should never be a hesitation or fear of administering in case someone is not overdosing. Don't stall and think, well, maybe I'm going to hurt this person. No, if they're not overdosing, it will not harm them. So it's always recommended, when in doubt, to utilize the naloxone. You have it on hand.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. Let's talk a little bit about the road back from addiction. Tyson, for those who may already be addicted to opioids or prescription pills, tell us about the dangers involved. And then what does the road look like for students coming back from addiction or overdose? What resources are available to them, and how can their parents, friends, schools support them?
Right. So we know the road coming back from addiction can be very, very difficult. There's a lot of stigma attached to it. There may be some embarrassment, a little bit of shame. We understand that. We know that. We also know that about 60% of our folks that are addicted to drugs will relapse at some point if they don't have the support that they need. So that's why programs like the PTA and Livy are so important in this endeavor, because we have to make sure that we empower the families, empower the parents, empower our peer groups, our community groups. So when that student does come to that parent, that trusted guardian, the counselor, or school peer group, that they're comfortable in approaching them, they're comfortable in talking about the problems or the issues that they're having, and that we can connect them with the right services that they need.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. We received a couple great questions from our audience. They'd like to know more about what fentanyl is being found, where it's being found. Is it in candies or food as well? And then can people be exposed by touch, or does fentanyl need to be ingested? Tyson, are you able to speak to that?
Yeah, I can speak to that. To my knowledge, we haven't found it in any food or candies yet. Now, we do know that some of the cartels are pressing pills and putting food color in the pills, so they make it look like candies. That may be where they're coming up with that. But as far as regular daily food that you'd buy at the grocery store, we haven't seen that yet.
Okay, I guess that's good news, thankfully. Ryan, I'd like to go to you for our last question, and then maybe if we have some time permitting, we'll cover a couple more. after this. This is a scary topic for parents and those who care for our kids, guardians, coaches, etc., who want to help. Speaking as a parent, we can sometimes sound out of touch or unsympathetic or give unrealistic advice. What are a few things we can do or say that would be more helpful? And then what's a realistic plan we can offer them if they're confronted by a friend offering pills, even if it's just an Advil or an allergy pill?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And it can be a scary topic for a parent to bring up, and it's important to start doing it early and to continue on, because when you go bring it up with your teenager right now, it's going to feel a little awkward, right? You're probably going to have to endure a little bit of eye rolling, but they need to hear it, and you should feel confident that it is sinking in. And it may not sink in that first time, but you have to continue to have that conversation. So the way I would approach those conversations is to start by listening. Right. Ask them what they know about fentanyl. They most likely have heard about it. They probably have some facts. You may be surprised by how much they know. So it's important to let them sound that out with you. Also, I think it's important to educate yourself on the facts and stick to the facts. The moment you say something that's inaccurate, you can lose credibility and they may not listen to you anymore. Right. So also another important element of these conversations is to be very open and empathetic with them. Do not judge. Try not to reinforce the stigma. Talking about fentanyl and the dangers of poisoning and overdose is not going to give them the idea to go do fentanyl. It's important to know that, right? Be open and honest with them about that. And then, as I mentioned earlier in my previous answer, it's important to normalize that conversation, right? Check in with them regularly. The more you do that, the more you bring it up with them, the more it's going to resonate, the less awkward that conversation is going to be. And over time, more and more that's going to sink into them. And you might find that they're coming back to you with ideas and suggestions. So to the question about a realistic plan, I talk about this with my 14-year-old. We have scenarios. The important thing is there's not really a perfect plan, but you need to come work on something with your child. Have them think through what they might say when somebody offers them, something that they're not expecting. It could be at a party, some sort of gathering. What I've heard from teenagers like my daughter is the easiest thing to do is just to say, "Hey, I'm feeling sick. I need to leave." Call a parent and leave. That's a very easy way to get out of things. The next one might be, "Hey, blame it on my parents. My parents drug test me. I can't risk getting caught." The next thing might be, if I'm on a sports team or, I'm a dancer or cheerleader, I can't risk getting benched because I was tested. So I think those are some easy outs, and there's many other ways of doing it. Come up with something they're comfortable with and practice. Do the role playing. And then finally, if you have a child who is very confident and wants to spread the message, arm them with the information, encourage them to actually bring up the things we're talking about here, how dangerous it is, because they might actually save the life of somebody else at that party or the person who's trying to give them that drug.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Thank you so much. Well, I think we're going to have a little bit more time. So we're going to go to a couple more questions that we had, if we had time. So Tyson, if you can speak to this. We've heard many stories in the news about fentanyl test strips for users to test pills for the presence of fentanyl, and perhaps that being a more realistic option than the just say no approach. But we've also heard that taking any unprescribed pill carries too much risk. What are the legal, realistic, effective options for Texas parents and teens to stay safe from fentanyl?
Another very good question. So one of the issues that we need to make parents aware of is that look, we encourage fentanyl test strips. However, you have to remember that the fentanyl test strips are not going to be as accurate. Looking at the quantities that or fentanyl that would be put in the pills, you can easily, when you test that pill, you can easily test the binder of that pill and not get any fentanyl at all. So, or if the fentanyl is actually buried deeper inside the pill, you may not get it tested. It just may not test. So I know it doesn't sound like the best option. Just say no, but we've got to stress to our kids that you can take all the precautions you want. You can use test strips. We can have naloxone. But it really comes down to just simply not taking those pills. If you order anything over the internet, if you get anything from your friends, expect it to be laced with fentanyl. It's as simple as that. If you're not getting it from the doctor, if you're not getting it from your pharmacy, you are literally gambling with your life, and it's just not worth it. You're more important than that.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. And last question, Ryan, tell us a little bit more about what role schools should play in fighting the fentanyl epidemic. Are there strategies you've seen that have been most effective? And is there curriculum like around Tucker's Law that schools are required to follow?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's very important for teens and kids to hear this from multiple angles, and the schools play an extremely important role in this. So the organization that I work with, Texas Against Fentanyl, most recently sponsored what's called Tucker's Law, which passed in the Texas legislative session that just ended a few months ago. And what that does is actually mandates Texas schools to educate students in grades 6 through 12 on fentanyl abuse prevention and drug awareness. So that is in the works, and it is going to be coming into schools across Texas. Texas Against Fentanyl is also working on the curriculum itself. We're working with a curriculum developer to build that out based on private donations. We're also working on getting some state funding to help with that. And that curriculum that's going to be developed is going to be interdisciplinary, and it's going to empower students to have to know the dangers and how to protect themselves from fentanyl. So, one of the things that we're trying to do is change this up from, the 80s and 90s kind of just say no message to be a bit more effective through new techniques, such as using real life stories of kids in Texas who've been impacted. What we've seen is that does create aha moments. So when you talk about how can schools do a better job, I think putting students who are educated, who have been impacted by this in front of their peers, that's going to connect with them, or to bring in victims' parents, families like myself, Claudia, to actually talk about how it impacted their family. Those sorts of emotional tie-ins really help connect with the kids. So the other thing I think it's important for schools to be thinking about in partnership with parents is the education is going to resonate better with kids if it's paired with mental health support. Right? Kids have crazy levels of stress and anxiety these days. They have so much pressure coming to them. So being able to be there to listen to them around the troubles that they have, giving them that support, taking some of the pressure off, that's going to make them less likely to say yes when somebody offers them a pill, or for them to seek out something like Xanax or Adderall that might actually be poison with fentanyl. So even, while we are developing this curriculum and it will be in Texas schools, it's not going to be in there yet. So we are encouraging schools, and we'd love to encourage the PTA to help with this, to go ahead and start to create opportunities to educate students on a regular basis. So impacted students, parents like myself, we do go out and speak at assemblies. You can reach out to our organization, to Livy, to others, and we can bring in expertise, expert speakers to speak about this topic and how best to connect with the kids.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much. And thank you all for just your words of wisdom and just so much information. So thank you for attending today's webinar. We're going to hear from our president.
Melinda,
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. We've actually got time enough for a couple more questions.
Okay.
If everybody is good.
Sure.
Okay. If I can, Jared, can we go back to you? We had a couple of questions asking, again, around what age kids are being introduced to fentanyl. And if they're facing addiction, what resources, especially if, of course, money is an issue, if there are cost-effective resources available for those currently in
Well, I can only tell you about the specific people that I've seen working with the fire department over these last few years. I've seen kids as young as 12, 13 that I get reports on my desk saying that they passed away from an overdose from fentanyl. And, that's why I do what I do, because I don't want to see any teen pass away again from this crisis. And so doing programs like this allow me to talk to teens, go out to schools. I've got requests from different high schools to come out and speak. What they can do is, if money is an object or an issue, you can reach out to MetroCare, which is a state-funded service. They will do a OSAR screening, and it will allow you to hopefully get approved for that, and then you can get treatment. And then there's other organizations depending on where you live. If you live in Tarrant County or Collin County or some of the other surrounding counties, just reach out to the Mental Health Authority. NIPA is typically the one that we have, North Texas Behavioral Authority, and then call them and see if you can request getting signed up to get healthcare for your kid. That's probably the best way. And if you have insurance, then go to the doctor. What they're starting to do now is if you have any pain medication that's prescribed by your physician, they're also giving you a prescription for Narcan as well. So in case you have some issues with that. So I think that's a good thing. Again, what I can say is Narcan is not the answer. Narcan is just going to allow your kid, teen, or someone else to live long enough to make a better decision. And as this panelist has said all day today, the good decision is not to take any drugs from anybody, any friends or any family members, unless it's a prescribed medication. And that's the best way. Or you get it from a store and it's safe and it's packaged. So.
Yeah. All right, man. Lots of great information. Lauren, was there another question?
We do. We've got time for, I think, our last one. We know we've got a lot of parents who have students who are transitioning from high school to college. Cynthia, would you please speak on how we can prepare that age group of children to transition from high school to college with that extra independence that comes with the transition in the midst of this epidemic? Oops, sorry. Can you unmute, Cynthia?
My bad. Technology is a challenge today. So thank you. What we do is we talk to collegiate organizations, to colleges, and what we are finding is so many students are not aware of the fentanyl poisoning that's happening. And so what I'm going to encourage is that it's never too early, just like Ryan said, like everyone said here, it's never too early to talk to your kids about what is happening. Because especially when they go off to college and there's that new freedom that, oh, wow, things are different now. I don't have mom and dad here. It creates a more open environment for them to experiment. So I think starting early absolutely is important with those open-ended questions. Send them to college with Narcan. Have them, put it in their backpack. Make sure that they are equipped with that as well. And would just like to say one of very impactful meeting that I had was a young man came up to me, and one of the fraternity young men came up afterwards and said, "We didn't know. Thank you for talking to us." And he said, "We didn't know that the Adderall that we're passing around and the Xanax that we're passing to each other could be potentially life-threatening, could be laced with fentanyl, and it could be our killer." And so the fact is they really, a lot of them don't know, and it's our job and responsibility to teach them, make them aware, so that when they go to that new environment, they're prepared to handle it.
Thank you all for attending today's webinar on how we can better understand and respond to the fentanyl crisis. We covered a lot of information, including the dangers of fentanyl and the severity of the overdose crisis, the signs and symptoms of a fentanyl overdose, how to administer Naloxone, the life-saving medication that can reverse the overdose, available resources and support services for individuals and families affected for fentanyl misuse. I hope you found this information valuable and informative. Remember, even a small amount of fentanyl can be deadly. It's important to be aware of the risks and know what to do in case of an overdose. Before we conclude, I want to leave you with a call to action. Share the information you learned today with your family, friends, and colleagues. The more people who are aware of the dangers of fentanyl, the more lives we can save. If you or someone you know is struggling with addiction, please seek help. There are many resources available, and you don't have to go through this alone. Stay informed about the latest developments and recommendations regarding fentanyl safety and response protocols. If you are a PTA leader, stay informed about our advocacy efforts and how we can help as PTA members. If you are not a PTA member, please share the power of your voice and sign up today at joinpta.org. Here is our Texas PTA President, Jennifer Easley, with some concluding remarks. Jennifer?
As we wrap up this crucial panel discussion on the fentanyl crisis, I want to emphasize how directly relevant and impactful this issue is in our communities, families, and schools. So thank you, Melinda, Lauren Bingham, Texas PTA Director of Communications and Member Relations, and Carrie Mays, our Texas PTA Programs Manager, for organizing this important event, and to our amazing panelists for sharing such helpful and truly impactful information today. The insights shared by our panel underscore the urgency for us as PTA members to be informed advocates and champions for our children and their well-being. As you could hear, the fentanyl crisis knows no boundaries, affecting individuals of all ages, including our students. The panel highlighted the importance of education and the awareness in preventing the spread, making it clear that our roles as parents and educators extends beyond our classrooms. And by staying informed, we empower ourselves to recognize the signs and support those in need within our communities. And as Melinda mentioned, as PTA members, we are uniquely positioned to be conduits of information and catalysts for change. The intersection of education, public health, and community involvement is where we thrive. And we can contribute to the solution by incorporating discussions about the dangers of fentanyl into our PTA meetings, engaging local health professionals, and advocating for comprehensive drug education programs in our schools. So let's also considering supporting initiatives that address mental health and substance abuse issues, recognizing that these challenges often underlie the prevalence of fentanyl abuse. And although we heard today, I think that it just takes one pill. Our collective voice can influence policies that prioritize prevention, treatment, and support services for those affected. So thank you for your attention, your engagement, and your commitment to make a positive impact in our communities. Together, we as Texas PTA can be a force for change in the face of the fentanyl crisis.
Thank you, Jennifer. Together, we can make a difference in the fight against fentanyl overdose. Thank you so much for attending, and thank you to each of our panelists, Cynthia, Tyson, Ryan, and Jared, for sharing your invaluable knowledge with us. We hope you have a safe and healthy day.